Hey folks, this is going to be real annoying because I forgot my tripod today. So maybe Dana will let me sit by her.
I would love that.
But we're gonna try to actually just prop this up and see if you can see what's going on, folks. It's a bad angle. No, I'm just trying to figure out how to live stream the meeting because I forgot my tripod with me.
Oh, and holding that is just too...
It gets too rickety, yeah. So I'm just trying to... That looks like a great shot, guys. The meeting is going to start here shortly. And at the end of this thing, I'm going to talk about how Denver sheriffs tried to stop me from coming into this meeting because I had cannabis on me and I didn't have a printed card, just a PDF. Because that's a good thing.
There's always more to the story, isn't there?
There's always more to the story, but you are now, as a medical marijuana patient, allowed to carry your medical marijuana into every city and county building because I threatened to sue the pants off of them for I had to eat 2 joints in the security line because they wanted me to throw it away. And no, this is my constitutional authority.
Oh my God.
So I left the dispensary. They had a sale, so I got went and bought some cannabis and had it in the bags, brand new, thing on it and everything. Where's your license? It's right here on my phone. There you go. It doesn't count. I bought my cannabis with this license on my phone. You're going to accept this. So they wouldn't call I said, get your supervisor. I'm not.
When was this today?
Just on the way in. So I'm like messing with the supervisor. The sheriff's calling. The sheriff's like, you're not getting in this building unless you. And I'm like, no.
They were able to get a hold of the sheriff?
I was about to call the sheriff,
okay.
Administration staff directly, and be like, yo, Furman, what's up with this? We've been through this, right? Denial of access, I'm going to put my camera on these. And I didn't. I waited to go live. I was about to put my camera up there and give them enough grief, which would have made me some good money.
Then they ended up letting you in.
They ended up letting me in, yeah. But I don't play this game anymore. Like, I always have cannabis on me walking into a city and county building, and I will always test their system to make sure that everybody's trained properly. Because if I don't do it, a lot of people.
So you wanted to make sure that they knew that when you came in, so
well,
they were good.
No, it's just the rules, right? So when you pull out, like, you go through security, you pull out your keys and your phone and your letter and all that stuff.
And cannabis.
I put on my 2 ounces of marijuana right there in the basket.
Wow, what a world.
They're like, where's your license? No, here's my license. It's not printed. It doesn't have to be. And yes, it does. No, it doesn't. Okay, here we are. Here's the license. Now you see it. Call the sheriff. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and here I am. I didn't leave the building. I came on the bus.
So did they finally said okay, but you hadn't actually talked to the sheriff's office?
Oh, I've talked to them before. Yeah, I've actually talked to the city attorneys, right? David Lane, one of my lawyers, wrote the city and said, hey, Loma's carrying his cannabis in the buildings, and they said, yes, he is, basically, right? They changed the policy, said, we don't want a lawsuit over this, we don't want to go to court over this. It's in the Constitution of the State of Colorado, it's the policy for the city of Denver to recognize patients' medical needs, right? And they wouldn't take somebody's birth control medication or their heart medication or whatever. So why would you take the life-saving equipment that keeps you from killing any human being on a daily basis? That's my medical marijuana.
Okay, then. That's good to know. Did not know that about you, Brian.
It's a joke.
I know.
It's life-saving.
I know, but I'm just not going to, you know what? I'm going to stay on your good side. Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Always in a room like this, there's always sub-stories going on, and all.
So many powerful people in this room. No guys, I want to, by the way, meet Dana, everybody. Hi, okay. So I'm going to refocus. There we go. This room is full of some of the funnest activists, community leaders, of course, our city council reps, news and camera crews are here. We're news too. Some of these people up for re-election, so there's always an attention to detail during that time period. And yes, we are going to be sitting down. I'm not going to sit and talk to you guys the whole time. This is the city and county city council meeting regards on safety from 1/16/19. We're going to talk about use of force. The Department of the Internal Monitor is looking for more oversight. And that includes like protection against retaliatory practices. Retaliatory practices is when the police follow your homeless feeding to your cars and then give you tickets as you drive away. That's a retaliatory practice. And so we are here just awaiting the beginning of the city council meeting in 3 minutes. I need to get my water and some things like that so that I'm protected effectively. And then we'll just, we're going to put this down and let you guys watch and listen. Bye, Josh. Oh, and you know we went camping together. That was so much fun. Cold. Very cold.
Were you involved in this?
It's a mixed bag of nuts.
I'm a little concerned.
Sure, why not? I apologize. Just stuff it on the seat hang out here. Yeah, I thought it was going to be smart. I didn't come in, and then everybody came in and filled space. Attach the bags, you don't have to worry about it. Thank you. Think around me.
I thought I recognized you, but I couldn't.
Brian.
Couldn't figure it out until you turned around and said, "Oh, I'm Brian." That's
Yeah, I'm kind of the official spokesman today. Official. Yeah.
You speak English?
You know what I mean? Like,
Oh no, I signed it.
you're just like, I think you're
It's definitely English.
It's part of the process.
like that. Did you see those
Retaliatory practices is one of the things that I have to talk about. Because we're beginning followers. And you go to an action and you start following.
You're talking about law enforcement? Followers can mean so many different things.
True. There's subscribers and all kinds of stuff going on in life. Cut the plastic. Yeah, I gotta get another sticker on this one. It's my handle. Plastic, like cut your life. Because when we're talking about the recycling process, first it's reduce, then reuse, then recycle, right? So reducing means cutting out the amount that we consume, eliminating. And so I am I'm building an empire slowly, one subscriber time. Getting ready to sell those so that I can build a recycling factory.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Long-term solar power to take trash and turn it
She didn't need her.
Oh no,
but it was kind of funny.
that are environmentally but then you could build with the trash. Look familiar, but
I don't think my best right now. I'm trying to do.
District 6. I have the pleasure of chairing this committee. Before we get started on the day's agenda, I will ask my colleagues to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Good morning. Wayne New, District 10.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Colin Clark, Elected District 7.
Robin Keach at large.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Councilman Paul Lopez, West Denver District 3.
Good morning, Kevin Flynn, Southwest Denver District 2.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Mary Beth Sussman, District 5.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Stacy Gilmore, District 11, the Front River, Denver.
Emily LaPel, Legislative Analyst.
Well, good morning, everybody. We're gathered together today to get an action item 19-0029, which is an ordinance clarifying and amending the authority of the Office of the Independent Monitor and expanding the appointment process for the Citizen Oversight Board. Before I turn the microphone over to Councilwoman Kinich to lead the discussion, I just wanted to acknowledge something that took place this past weekend. Was a confrontation between Denver police and a citizen at 6th and Inca. 2 of our officers were shot. Fortunately, are recovering at Denver Health and expected to make a full recovery. We had a SWAT officer that was also injured in an automobile accident on the way to serve in that same capacity. So we want to acknowledge their service and wish them well for a speedy recovery. With that in mind, turn the floor to Councilwoman Kinich to lead the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for acknowledging our officers. We sure appreciate them being their lives on the line every day. Well, we are here back to talk about the Independent Monitor Ordinance, and I'm going to focus my presentation just mainly on the changes that occurred since last time we were here and today, and then maybe we can take the public comment and then go into discussion of either the changes or the original items. We do have all the slides from the original items, but I thought I would just focus mostly on the changes. So, first of all, I want to thank the administration. We spent quite a bit of time with the city attorney's office, the mayor's office, the police department in particular, and the Department of Safety, just getting more questions on language, and so really helping to make sure we all understood things in the same way. So we had the most feedback from this body as well as from others about the appointment process. So that is the most significant change in the bill. So if you have the bill in front of you on page 5, you're going to see the appointment process. And we will be going to the nominating committee approach. So the way that this will work is very similar to the Board of Ethics, where we will, as a council, appoint 1 member of the nominating committee. The mayor's office will appoint 1 member of the nominating committee, and then we will make 1 joint appointment. That nominating committee will only meet if and when there are vacancies in the Citizen Oversight Board. And the way that this works is that if there is someone who's seeking reappointment, the ordinance gives them a chance to say, hey, I'd like to serve again. The the nominating committee then will evaluate them and decide whether they want to recommend that. If they do, they can send that recommendation on to the appointing agency, whether it's the council or the mayor or the joint appointment, they'll send it on. If we disagree with that reappointment, they would send it back to us, and or we would send it back to them, and they would then have to come up with a slate of 3. So they would do an advertisement and solicit. They're required to check into the COB to say what skill sets or gaps do you have. Maybe the COB says we really don't have enough individuals from this community of color, or we don't have anyone who has this kind of expertise. We have all this technology like body cameras we're talking about. It would be great if we had someone with that background. So they're supposed to take input from the COB on what the gaps might be. But the nominating committee will do this recruitment process and then send 3 names either to the mayor, to the council, or to both. And again, we have the choice of accepting one of those names or sending them back and saying, nope, we'd like another slate. So, our obligations will be to appoint the nominating committee member and then to review the slate they send us and select for openings from that. The other change that was, I'll just stop there. That's the changes to the appointment process, and it just ensures that there is communication with the COB, but it's all going to happen by a nominating committee.
Excuse me, Councilwoman. President Clark has a comment.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to clarify, the members of the nominating committee have to be people who are not serving on the oversight board. It's separate. It's
that is correct.
Members of the board who become on the
Yes, and they also need to not be members of the city team. They can't be employees of the city. They need to be independent community members.
Great.
Yes.
And then on the appointment, are the mayoral ones appointed and then confirmed by council, or just appointed by the mayor? And are the council ones confirmed by the mayor, or just appointed by us?
Just appointed by us, and then we don't have council confirmation in the bill for the mayoral appointees.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So each is independent. Okay. Here's, we might have a problem with this slide. So I'm gonna go on while we worry about technology later, okay? So I'll give you page references. So the next change that was made to the bill is we had discussion about policy. And this is, if you'll remember correctly, when we were here last time, we just had a placeholder in the bill letting folks know we were gonna talk more to the administration. And at that point, we did that conversation. And so if you go to your bill, on the bottom of page 9, the top of page 10, you are going to see the language that we discussed with them. So there's really two pieces to the policy piece. The first is that we've seen a number of working groups in recent years around important topics. So there was a working group around the use of force policy revision. There was a working group, for example, that was established to talk about the racial profiling data collection, to be able to check the race of folks that are being stopped and to see whether there were any disparities. There have been discussions about, new technologies like body cameras. If and when there is a working group that's established, this provision on the bottom of page 9, subsection C, establishes a guaranteed opportunity for the monitor to be appointed and be a part of that. In most cases, the monitor has ended up on those committees, but it's been after a fair bit of back and forth. And the goal of us as sponsors was to make sure that that was not so inefficient, that it was just understood that there's expertise there, they should give input. These bodies never are the final decision maker, and that's really important. The agencies themselves usually take these recommendations, take these drafts, whatever the work group does, and the agencies make the decisions. So just to be clear, the monitor doesn't decide what policies are going to be adopted. The monitor gives input just like other stakeholders. So that's the first piece, is about working groups. The second piece is about notification and an opportunity to comment when there are policy revisions. So sometimes the department might be making a policy revision without getting a working group set up. And if they're going to be doing that on an area within the purview of the monitor, it asks, the bill requires that there be notice and an opportunity to comment before any policy is finalized. So again, this has happened somewhat awkwardly in the past, where a policy comes out and it's kind of introduced as final. The monitor then gives a bunch of feedback, we give feedback, and they go back and revise it based on that input, but it's been awkward. So this hopefully will move that conversation forward and say, okay, before we finalize something, there's this opportunity to comment. So those are the two pieces on the policy input. And do you want me to pause there, Mr. Chair, and see if there are questions on that change? Clarifying or
Sure.
otherwise?
Anything from members of council on this point?
We're caught up on the technology, thank you. The next slide just details what I would consider some smaller changes in just wording. One of the questions we got asked is, well, we have a current COB board, a Citizen Oversight Board. How are the new appointments going to work? Who gets them? The counselor, the mayor? So we just, in the past, this has not been something that gets written into the ordinance, but I've gotten so many questions on it, we decided to go ahead and put it in the bill. So the way it's going to work is there are 2 new appointments right away. Are there any vacancies right now?
There's one that the mayor apparently is working on filling. It may already be filled, but we haven't been notified.
Okay, so there may or may not be one other vacancy, but the first 2 vacancies that will come up, the first one will be made by the council, the second will be made by the mayor, and will continue to alternate until the entire board turns over and is made up of half and half, with the final appointment being the joint appointment. So it just creates a little clarity on how that process is going to work. And we'll also, just as a reminder, have to do some staggering in terms of making sure that folks kind of are rolling off. So the next change is really about this conversation we had about what happens when there's some kind of an agreement involving discipline that is, not a final disciplinary decision in the traditional sense, but might involve a settlement or a signed agreement to go into some discipline where a worker somehow agrees, a deputy or a officer agrees to the discipline. So the way that it was explained to us by the Department of Safety and the City Attorney's Office is there's 2 kinds of settlements that are occurring. The first kind is where someone says, hey, yes, I agree to this particular discipline that we talked about, and I'm going to waive my right to appeal And that happens early in the process, and maybe there's even been discussions before the group that has the conduct review meeting where the agencies get together and discuss the settlement or the discipline. And so I'm just gonna use my word for that, that's kind of like these informal or pre-discipline agreements. The second thing we learned about is that there are formal settlement agreements whereby, let's assume the chief has imposed discipline or the Department of Safety has imposed discipline on an officer, that officer appeals, and now we have a legal situation where they're going through the appeal process, maybe they're even appealing to the court process after they've exhausted the civil service process, and you have a very formal agreement that says, okay, I'm agreeing to this settlement of discipline, and I, agree not to appeal this decision further, and it's a pretty formal thing. There have been 8 of those kinds of cases, the really formal kind, but there have been many more of the informal kinds of settlements. The idea here is that anytime there is a settlement discussion, the monitor just needs to get a notice and a chance to comment before something is signed and agreed to. The monitor doesn't sit in settlement discussions, that's not what they do. They don't sit in attorney meetings, but they do, what we don't want is a situation where someone's talking about a disciplinary outcome and the monitor doesn't have the chance to comment that the ordinance intended them to always have. So it's appropriate to have these discussions, it's just that the monitor needs to be aware of them and give a chance to comment. For example, if the monitor, he or she believes, for example, that this is an officer who's had numerous incidents in the past and that a settlement isn't maybe in the public's best interest because there is a pattern here or something like that, right? It gives them a chance to know about it. So that language is in there, and the change was minor. It was to receive notice and opportunity to comment. But I go into the background just so that council understands what it is we learned and is clear, that everyone's clear that our intention here is that the language says before any written or oral agreement. So whether it's these informal settlements or these more formal ones, again, my words, probably not the lawyer's words, that the monitor gets notice. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions before I do the last one.
Councilman Ortega?
Just a quick question about this part of the process and just clarifying that while the case is in the middle of the process, that there shouldn't be a report issued by the monitor. So it's after the appeal processes have been exhausted, and that the monitor typically does a report. Is that accurate, Nick?
Yeah. You want to come to the table, please?
Sure.
Yeah. And introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Nick Mitchell, independent monitor. So it's accurate that there would be no report while an investigation was pending or discipline was pending. We don't traditionally wait for the appellate process to be exhausted before issuing a report or discussing a disciplinary matter in one of our reports. We include all discipline imposed in the prior year in each of our annual reports, and some of those cases are still being appealed through the Civil Service Commission or the Career Service Board process, and sometimes in the court.
So for the ones that are in the appeal process, do you go into them in detail in those reports? Or do you just sort of refer to them in aggregate?
No, we include summaries, relatively high-level summaries, but summaries nonetheless of all discipline that was imposed. They may be a paragraph long, perhaps a little bit shorter, maybe a little bit longer, even in cases that are under appeal.
Okay, so I have a question for the city.
Can I ask him to clarify one more thing, though? Most of those, it's very rare for there to be a name associated. They're typically anonymous.
That's correct.
Right, so it's very rare, only where, and there's a provision in the ordinance that says only where the city has somehow made something public, like the name of the party, where, for example, we had a major settlement in the case of Michael Marshall, so that's an example where then the report had a name, but generally speaking, if you read the reports, they don't have any names in them, so you wouldn't be talking about, Jane's case or Jose's case.
So, who's here from the city attorney's office? Okay, Kirsten, would you mind, so I just wanted to ask, so in the case of a name is mentioned in the report, and it's going through the appeal process, does that create any potential liability for the city until that case is actually I'm just concerned.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Kirsten Crawford, Legislative Counsel. These are all case by case when the city attorney's office, I personally would not be the city attorney that would review the report and make that sort of analysis. But we did have discussions throughout this process that there would be always an eye to the report that it didn't compromise our litigation position. And if it did, that would be redacted from the report.
Okay. And I think it's important to have that input throughout the process, but I was just concerned about the reports being done in the middle of any of the procedures that are, you know, kind of going through the normal steps. So.
Yeah, and just by way of clarification, I can think of only one example, which Councilwoman Kanish mentioned, of Michael Marshall, in which we use the names of the individuals in the reports. In 99.9% of the circumstances, the reports are anonymous, there are no names included. And also by way of context, there are some appeals that have been pending for years and years and years. I think in our most recent report, we talked about a case that had been pending since 2012 with a whole variety of stages in the appellate process of going up to the Court of Appeals, being remanded down, going back up, so you know, some of the appellate cases take a good number of years to be resolved.
And some of these are sheriff cases, some are DPD cases,
right.
So, okay.
Right.
And colleagues, I would like to limit questions at this point to clarifying until we hear from our public comment speakers.
Great, so the last thing I'll just, the last bullet here just says there were a couple inconsistencies. We had a couple of places where officers have to self-report when they're involved in certain kind of incidents versus other situations where the department is giving notice to the monitor's office. And Councilman Flynn, thank you for catching, we just clarified some of those timelines so that the department has the same requirement no matter which part of the code it's in. And so with that, those are the changes. We have the slides here if there are questions after public comment about the remaining items. I know there have been questions about the requirement to, maybe I will just talk about this one piece, how the piece with the sheriff and the chief works. So if folks want to go to, you want to go to slide number 6, number 2. So there are two ways that this fix works. First of all, we've added to the ordinance that the oversight occurs regardless of who is making the investigation. So right now, internal affairs is often associated with the internal affairs department within within the sheriff's department or within the police department. And so that's how the ordinance was written. So IAB within the police department, within the sheriff's department. Over the past few years, there have been several cases that were involving the chief or the sheriff that were escalated up to the Department of Safety. And so there became a question about whether oversight changes if someone different is doing the investigation. So the first thing we changed is to make clear that even if the Department of Safety is the one doing the investigation, the oversight powers are the same. That's also important because there was a recent proposal to move the sheriff's oversight altogether out of the sheriff's department, so a much larger number of cases in the future may not from within the internal affairs.
Pike is not in Denver. Pike is in Colorado Springs.
To make sure that no matter who's investigating a case, the monitoring occurs. And then secondly, we've added in the monitor's discretionary powers, including the chief or the sheriff or their appointees. So it should not matter how they come into service. Just to clarify if there were any questions about that. So those two changes, we did not make any changes to. I know it's been a topic of conversation. I just wanted to review with folks how those changes work. So with that, that's my updates to the committee.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Okay, we'll go into public comment. We have 15 minutes set aside for public comment. We have
I gotta be quick,
13
guys.
speakers, 2 minutes per speaker maximum. We'll look at maybe stretching it a little bit if you can be as concise as possible. I don't know how you can be much more than 2 minutes. First up, Laura Altobelli, then Nick Rogers, Evelyn Putt, and Miguel Ceballos Ruiz. Ms. Laura? Yes, please. Thank you. Emily will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. Thank you so much. Go ahead.
My name is Laura Altobelli. I formerly worked at Denver Police Department as a crime analyst. I have also worked for the Civil Service Commission as a background investigator. I live in Kendra Black's district, and just wanted to come out today to be for this bill. Anytime that there is not clarity in the language, the police department or the sheriff's department may or may not have a loophole that they take advantage of. Also, just as citizens, we not only do we want to do the right thing, our police department needs to want to do the right thing and should be very pleased to have additional oversight and additional help with these kinds of cases. The city of Denver nationally in the professional crime analyst world is a Sodom and Gomorrah of police brutality. And those kinds of things might be because we have such a smart demographic that reports things, but there's a lot that we can do to improve the process. So I appreciate being here today and this effort that's being made.
Thank you. Next up, Nick Rogers and Evelyn Todd.
Nick Rogers, Denver Police Protective Association. I spoke to you last time. We as the union, we're okay with
this guy's a scum.
Everything except page 4, line 8. The monitor may publish additional reports throughout the year about matters within the duties of the monitor. The issue with that, and I think Councilman Ortega touched on it, we're not concerned about an appellate time, 2012 cases. We're concerned about current cases that the monitor weighs in on that might sway the director of safety on discipline.
Dirty
More
bastard.
importantly, for this council, if the monitor publishes a report, which whether it's a paragraph and you think it's benign, it's not, because David Lane is going to get that, and he's going to go ahead and add that to his lawsuit if there's a civil matter pending. I think you need to use some common sense and not utilize that forum to publish reports when there's civil litigation pending. That's going to add liability to the city of Denver. I actually came here more to talk about Seattle. I've been in contact with the police union, Rich O'Neill from Seattle. I implore this body to slow down before you implement this. Like I said, I think it's a good process. You need to talk to Seattle. In 2011, Seattle police had 1,800 police officers. The Department of Justice came in, put them under a consent decree. In 2019, they have 1,300 police officers. They can't retain, they can't hire police officers because they're under that consent decree. And the citizen oversight, Nick Mitchell's group, the NACOL, they run the city of Seattle. They absolutely, positively have control over the entire department. Violent crime is up 65% over the national average, 123% for property crimes. We don't want to become Seattle. Denver is Denver. We got to be smart and we got to be considerate of how we proceed. I got to stop. Do I have to stop?
You gotta stop.
All right, thank you.
That scumbag.
Next, Evelyn Hunt, Miguel Ceballos Ruiz, and Brian Loman.
Good morning, I'm Evelyn Hunt. I'm a member of Together Colorado, a nonpartisan, multiracial, multi-faith community organization that unlocks the power of people to transform our communities through organizing. I'm here to support the measure to strengthen the Office of the Independent Monitor and the Citizen Oversight Board. The board and the monitor can't do their job without strong city ordinances that support and protect their independence and investigative authority. And the history of the people of Denver is that we strongly support the OIM, and evidenced by the fact that we passed City Charter 2B by a wide margin in 2016. However, the OIM has been hampered in its work by a number of structural problems, including that the manager of safety decided unilaterally to exempt the chief of police and sheriff from oversight. The Citizens Oversight Board is overworked, and disciplinary and policy recommendations made by the OIM are sometimes ignored by the police and sheriff departments. I want to speak personally a minute. I'm a physician. Those of us, including police and sheriffs, who often hold the life of people we serve our hands are required to be accountable to the community in particularly detailed ways. Just as the Board of Medical Examiners of the state is empowered to investigate my work and take action against me if I hurt someone, so the Office of the Independent Monitor needs the tools to ensure that the monitor can effectively ensure accountability of the people in our system who carry weapons. So therefore, we strongly urge you to pass this ordinance. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Miguel Ceballos Ruiz, and Brian Loma, and Joe Dollar.
Good afternoon. Good morning. My name is Miguel Ceballos Ruiz. I am a member of the Mount Bella community. I'm also a board member of the Mount Bella organizing community. I'm a board member of the Colorado Latino Forum. I'm a former executive board member of the Colorado Democratic Party. I'm here on behalf of myself today. I grew up in Mount Bella in a time that was really hard for the community. I survived the civil violence, which was back in the early 90s. And I strongly believe that it was the community who came together and who pulled us out of that, right? I don't believe it was tough on crime legislation. I don't believe it was more policing. I believe it was the community. It was us who did that. But you know what? We still have some very problematic policing practices and policing policies in our city. And they haven't caught up to the progress. They are not as strong as they could be right now. And I think this is a very important step in achieving the type of criminal justice reform that we need in the city of Denver. So I commend you on that, and I strongly urge your support for this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Brian Loma.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Brian Loma. I hang with people known as Occupy Denver. And I want to support this measure as it's being put forth. We see in the streets of Denver a lot of issues that do come from property break-ins and people who are not behaving as good citizens in the society. But we also have a society where the people with the weapons that are most publicly visible aren't held accountable enough. In the time that I've lived in this community as a transplant, I started my actions of going out and using my constitutional authorities, the first one being free speech, finding myself battering against police officers in the street, pushing off the sidewalks and off the roads. Today, actions are a lot more peaceful, less violence. The use of force has definitely toned down, but there are still patterns where we can see actions happening against individuals repetitively or against groups repetitively. And it's this kind of oversight extensions, I believe, one of those factors that we're looking at that is so important today. Because when you have retaliatory practices occurring in the city of Denver, you're opening yourself up for more of those David Lane lawsuits. So with that, I thank you guys.
Thank you. Joe Dollar, and then Lynn Eagle Feather, Mark Cohen.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Joe Delara. I want to thank the City Council for the opportunity to come today to comment. My wife and I wanted to attend today to give our support for this ordinance and to applaud you all for putting this proposal forward for consideration. During the January 16th session, there were some comments made questioning the need for changes to the Oversight Committee. Specifically, comments were made that suggested an artificial need for the Oversight Committee, that only activists have spoken out in favor of this bill, and that the actual community doesn't feel expansion of the Oversight Committee is needed. This inspired us to attend today to add our support, purely as members of the Denver community. We find it appalling that the law enforcement community does not embrace this proposal and use this opportunity to work with the community to become more collaborative and transparent partners for our community. It is also appalling that law enforcement will push back against a proposal that calls for such reasonable checks and balances. We are not activists speaking on behalf of any organization. I am a 20-year Denver resident who first came here in 1999 to attend medical school and a 6-year surgical residency program, where I met my wife, who was working in the medical device industry at the time. Both of us are working professionals and have resided in Denver for over 20 years. I I'm certainly grateful for the opportunity to receive such an amazing medical education, and in an effort to give back to our community, I continue to offer treatment to underserved and uninsured patients as part of my medical practice. I always thought that Denver would be my place before I finished my career. That all changed last year when we were unfairly targeted by members of the Denver Police Department through the public nuisance ordinance, an ordinance that has no oversight, despite the written law that specifically calls for civilian oversight committee. We personally experienced a horrendous, overreaching arm of the Denver Police Department that likely would not have happened had there been proper oversight. This was such a horrible attack on our livelihood and civil rights that we no longer feel safe in the city of Denver, and as a result are actually making plans to leave. Hopefully this proposal is the first step of many to updating city ordinances that are completely out of date in relation to civil rights. Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you. Lynn Eagle Feather, Mark Cohen, and Roshan Bliss.
Good morning, my name is Lynn Eagle Feather, and I'm a member of the American Indian Movement, and you are on stolen land. My son was killed on July 12, 2015, in front of many children. His son is deeply impacted by this and wants to die so he can see his dad. He's only 6 years old. I was targeted at my home on Morrison Road with police sitting outside my apartment many times. And I have pictures and in front of my place. And I think that this is very wrong that also that Trout is running around with a contentious 3% tattoo on his hand, which he didn't have the day that he killed my son. And he didn't have it the day after he killed my son. There's pictures of it on the internet. I would like to read something to you on behalf of my son. Take my grief. Do you want my grief? Please, for a moment, take it, please. Hold it next to your heart. Feel it burn. Tear you apart. Please, I beg of you, ease my mind. Give me sleep for just one night. Give the flashbacks and the heart-stopping pain, the helplessness from losing my way. Can you feel my grief? Hold it close. It will bring you to your knees. Your soul will yell. It will scream. Can you hear it bellow while it takes to your peace? Your body aches. Your mind stands still. You live in the past where things were real. Help me. I'd ask of you, take this grief for a day or two, just long enough so I can clear my head, so I can pretend that my child's not dead. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Mark Cohen, Roshan Bliss.
Good morning. Mark Cohen with the National Lawyers Guild and the Denver Justice Project. I spoke at the last meeting on behalf of this measure. I don't want to repeat myself except to say that I was part of the community action calling for police accountability that led to the creation of the ordinance that created the Office of the Independent Monitor and the COB. We knew when it was created, it's now 15 years ago, that we would have to revisit this ordinance in response to changes in the city. And here we are. And this measure is unquestionably necessary to bring this ordinance up to date so that OIM and the COB can continue to do their work effectively and efficiently. The only thing I would add is this measure is necessary but not sufficient. There are other changes that, and I don't have time to go into them, but there are other changes that we will need to look at that will require changes to the city charter. And I hope we can get this measure through and quickly move on to what else we need in order to make sure we have effective civilian oversight in this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Roshan Bliss, Jack Flott. Excuse the pronunciation.
Hello, my name is Rashawn Bliss. I'm with the Denver Justice Project. Thank you, council members, for the opportunity. Here to speak also in support of this set of ordinances. As I said last time, and will reiterate, the police and the sheriffs are the only people, the only city agents who are allowed to take life as part of their normal course of duties. And it is there's nothing more sensible than to make sure that they are properly overseen in using that authority. And I want to say that an important part of what we are asking for is beyond this measure. We think that this set of changes is a really important step. And I will also point out this has not been this has been a very slow process. The Denver Justice Project has been advocating for more than these changes since 2014. And so we commend you and ask you to vote in support of these. We also want you to consider going beyond this. We think that to be truly independent, the Independent Monitor's Office needs its own independent legal counsel instead of having to rely on city attorneys that are also defending the police that they are overseeing. And we think that the Independent Monitor needs to be able to have its own power to do its own investigations. It can't be independent if it is overseeing the investigations that the police are doing of themselves. We really believe that this ordinance is a good first step, a good maybe second step. There are some changes that you all have made in the past, but this is still not enough. So we urge you to vote for this, to vote for this part, to get at least partway there, but we expect you to go further beyond this, to the charter changes that are needed. And Denverites have been calling for these changes for a while. We'll be watching to see who supports. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jack? And this will be our last speaker. Apologies to those who were not able to pay.
Hi, my name is Jack Vladi. I'm here as a community member. I live in District 10, East District. I want to note today the first order of business for council was to honor police who are victims of violence. Now it's time to honor community members the same way. Sometimes I think people in these seats have forgotten what happened on August 9th, 2014. I'm originally from St. Louis, from North St. Louis County, where my grandma was murdered that day. There was rampant racism found at the Ferguson Police Department, and I know those same issues and disparities are here in Denver, and yes, in Seattle too. Another teenager, Jesse Hernandez, is murdered here January 26, 2015. Police all over this country are allowed to carry out the death penalty in the streets. It's unconstitutional. And then the city will charge taxpayers for killing 2 teenagers, millions of dollars. And then reverse the policy that says they can shoot into moving vehicles. It sounds like they know something they did was wrong. And then our DA, final words on Jesse Hernandez, listen to cops if you don't want to be killed. That's disgusting. Where's the leadership that will honor community members who are victims? This council has the opportunity to step into greater moral leadership by putting a check on the power to carry out the death penalty in the streets. It's a small step, and it's not enough, but it's a step towards accountability and safety. And then we'll keep it moving, and we won't forget. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to all our speakers, and again, apologies for those that we weren't able to hear from today. I've got Councilman Quinn and Councilwoman Sussman in the queue. Councilman Quinn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a member of the committee, but I came today to see the presentation on these changes and to thank the sponsors for listening and making a lot of changes that address so many of my concerns. I still have, excuse me, I still have one concern that I don't know that we can resolve, and I don't know how it would affect how I vote on it, but it's the method of appointment to the Citizen Oversight Board. It's much, much improved, but I'm not persuaded that we need a nominating committee such as we have for the Ethics Board, because we set up the nominating committee for the Ethics Board because we make those appointments of people who sit in judgment over us. So that principle led me to propose, and I haven't heard back from everybody yet, that if the principle here is that the COB provides oversight of an executive department, Department of Safety, the mayor probably shouldn't appoint any of them. This council should appoint all of them. And checked the requirement in the DRMC that has existed, but I don't think has ever been observed faithfully. The COB is supposed to reflect the diversity of the city, yet there has never been a member from Councilman Lopez's district, from Southeast Denver District 4, or from Councilman Clark's 1997, there has been only one member from my district, and that was the very first board in 2005. It was a gentleman, an 80-year-old, retired. I thought it was an FBI agent. Nick, you told me yesterday you thought he was CIA. If you told me, you probably have to kill me. But I would like this board, this body, to consider whether, in fact, the appointments to the board, in order to fairly reflect the geographic diversity, which is in the code, that we expand the membership to 13, and each of us appoints one. We would automatically have representation from the west side, from the southwest side, and from South Denver, which has never been represented in 15 years. There have been 26 individuals serving on the COB since it's been formed, and only one, as I mentioned, the gentleman from my district passed away after 4 years, from District 3 all the way through South Denver, all the way over to Southeast Denver. And
you can't buy Pikes Peak out
which has significant
sending money to Pikes Peak.
Between the public and the
We have to figure out how to pay
So I'd
it
like to
first.
consider that. I don't know if it's politically possible. I know the mayor's office may oppose it. But I think if we are to provide oversight of an executive agency, it is the legislative branch that will provide that. And so I'd like to know what the, in a perfect world, I think that's how we would have set it up. But, so I'd like to ask the sponsors what they think of that.
Well, I guess first I would like to say we did have some discussion with the administration early on about a majority of appointments coming from council, and that was not supported by the administration. So they can speak for themselves on your proposal, but I will say that we began our process with the majority of appointments. It did not appear that we would get a mayoral signature with a majority of appointments. So, but I will let them speak, and then I will ask Mr. Chair if we can bring Katina Banks up from the Citizen Oversight Board to hear if they have a thought about the proposal.
Thank you, council members. Tina Banks, Chair of the Citizen Oversight Board, as Councilman mentioned. You know, my experience on the board has shown me that more members would be helpful. The amount of work that we do, certainly we could benefit from that. And I have no objection at all to, or comments that are disagreeing with Councilman Flynn's observation about the representation. So this is something that from a board member perspective seems reasonable.
Thank you. I'd like to add, by the way, that when I asked Emily LaPelle, our analyst, to ask about the number of people who have been appointed to the board, that the response from the mayor's office was that they only require them to be citizens of residents of the city and county of Denver, and that they don't actually follow the guidance that's in the DRMC, which is that it must reflect the ethnic, racial, and geographic diversity of the city. Clearly, the appointments for 15 years have not. And if the mayor's office isn't following that guidance, maybe it's time for us to consider taking it on ourselves. I can see Sky jumping out of her seat.
Yeah, that question actually did not come to me, so I'm not sure who that was to. But we absolutely do in all those board appointments. It depends on who we get applications from, and I think there's a balance of factors. That is not the only consideration that's in the code associated with who's appointed. So we have a new director of boards and commissions. I'm happy to talk with that person and talk with some of the historical representation, but I don't think it's fair to say we ignored that criteria, so I just want to be clear on that.
In effect, it has been. Failing that, in my discussion with Nick Mitchell the other day, maybe a middle ground would be a requirement in this bill that the nominating committee take those factors into account and specifically recruit from those ethnic, racial, and geographic areas that have not been represented, particularly the West Side.
Thank you. Councilman.
Objection to the equal representation that you're proposing? What was the reason for anybody objecting to that? It makes a lot of sense.
I will be clear, we did not have a discussion about, Councilman Flynn sent us 3 pages of questions. We responded to most of them. He had shared this was an interest, but he did not share that he was bringing it forward as a concrete proposal, so we were not prepared. We did not have a discussion about it as a, like, you know, we made the change. The concern was he didn't think the COB should make its own appointments. We created the nominating committee, so it's news to us that this is a concrete proposal. So I would like my co-sponsors to to speak to their perspective on it, since this is an equal partnership. It was, along with 3 other pages of questions.
Councilman,
thanks, Mr. Chair. Councilman Flynn, I do appreciate your recommendation. However, I do have to confer. I do have to stand with our colleague Robin here, because we've been working on this for a very long time. Our process has been open. We try to engage with all members of City Council so as much as possible any movement that we were making in the ordinance. I'm not against that proposal, being a long-time council person who represents the West Side. However, if there is an amendment to the bill that's concrete, please bring it forward so we can actually engage people, but also because we are not, this isn't a council-led initiative, it is more of a community and COB-led initiative. This is something that we wanted to make clear from the get-go. We wanted to make sure that there is clarification in this bill for the independent oversight to take place. And that does include looking at the COB. I can tell you the very early iterations of what the bill looked like when we successfully put this into the charter. That discussion was taking place, but the communication and response back was, let that exist in ordinance so it can be nimble and so we can have a process. And that was the communication I got from the 3rd floor from the mayor's office. So there it is in front of ordinance. If you would like to put something forward, please do so and let us know formally so we can actually bring that into the process. However, I appreciate you, I appreciate any other councilman or councilwoman that advocates for our side of town as well. But I do have to say, without taking out of respect for Molly Gallegos and Cisco Gallardo and Reverend Paul Wilson and those who in the past, I have no problems, and I have no problems or qualms about Cisco Gallardo, Molly Gallegos, or Katina's ability to represent the interests of the West Side, especially when you look at Francisco Gallardo's work in the West Side and what he's done to help curb violence in our neighborhood and have those relationships with officers that we know by first-name basis to prevent violence and increase safety in the neighborhood. I think it's done so successfully, and that's why I was one of the supporters of him being on this oversight committee, as well as some of the others, Dr. Mary Davis, and folks have been part of this committee as well. So, is it exactly what we would see with Crab, or better represented if we each appoint somebody? And I don't know. I mean, we have to discuss that. I'm curious to see what some of our other colleagues think about it as well too, because the bill that we brought forward didn't have that. I count to a majority of folks based off of the bill that we have now. Hopefully, if this is in there, would you support something? Would you support this moving forward?
Actually, in my meeting, in my meeting with Nick yesterday, the suggestion that he had, sort of the middle ground, was that we have a basically commands the nominating committee to take those factors into account, which have not been.
Here's, right, I think it's looking at the current bill language.
So, Kirsten Crawford, Legislative Counsel, I just wanted to, because if we're working with the current language, it does say that the nomination committee shall certify a list of at least 3 nominees for each appointment. Oh, I'm sorry, I read the wrong line. Nomination committee shall seek input from the Citizen Oversight Board to address diversity of representation and qualifications. So, I mean, maybe we could just add in the regional issue, and maybe we would cover it that way.
I think it's in paragraph E of the qualifications. Just make a reference to the paragraph E. We have to take that.
It's already in the current,
right, in the current ordinance.
Yeah,
are
it's in
the
the
requirements.
Right.
That that's not up for
So we could reference that.
I would just add, as the third co-sponsor of this bill, that I'd love it if the council made all appointments. Okay, creating this bill.
Should there be an oversight representative from each district? It's a good idea.
Citizens groups, with the administration, with the police, with the monitor, with members of council, and I think we've come up with a good bill. I wholeheartedly agree with anything we can do to strengthen the idea of broadening the geographic representation. I think would be something that would not interfere with the process at all, would perhaps improve it. And I thank you for bringing that forward. Let's see, next up, Councilman Sussman.
Thank you. I have such a completely different question to ask. The CLB also has fire under it.
I don't know. I've been in this thing the whole time. I will find out after. I will go with that issue too.
So when you're making these changes, does it apply also then to, for example, the fire chief? You could go to number 2 here.
May I ask Nick Mitchell to address this? It's only law enforcement functions of the fire department, it's not all functions.
Right.
So it's, the chief, I don't know that the chief performs law enforcement duties, only certain members of the fire department do investigations of crimes. So I'll let Nick answer that.
So is the language, when it says clarify that the chief and sheriff are subject to the same oversight, does it mean also the fire chief?
The code draft is police chief, so the slide is vague, but the code says chief of police.
Okay.
Go watch that video when you guys get some time.
No, I agree with Councilwoman Kanish on that. The existing code makes clear that there's a small number of firefighters who have police training, carry sidearms, have the power to make arrests, principally in arson cases, is my understanding. Our jurisdiction with respect to the investigations is limited to that very small group of firefighters, which I think would probably not include the fire chief.
Okay, but all of the other changes that you're making would apply to the fire department's law enforcement people?
Some of them. Some of them. There are portions of the code that refer to all 3 departments, and there are other portions of the code that only refer to the sheriff, police. So I think we have to go through the bill and get a more complete answer after the meeting, just because the code itself currently did not consistently carry the fire department through all pieces of it.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. It's sort of a question of, are we forgetting something? Is there some wording that needs to be?
Hey Bill, let me ask you, should I mention to Nick?
COB is responsible for.
Can we ask Kirsten to analyze that, and if it's necessary, we could consider a conforming floor amendment for it?
That's absolutely right. You don't need to get back to me at all.
Councilman Sussman, I just want to know if
those of you who are joining us, cops keep killing,
you know, all
and they admit the citizens' responsibility to have oversight. So we are here today with the Oversight Committee giving a more investigative monitoring power to the Citizens Oversight Board as of the independent monitor.
Support this bill.
Sky Stewart, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Sky Stewart, Mayor's Office. Certainly don't speak for safety, but we tend to take positions as a city, not as individual agencies. So we have had conversations as a large body associated with this. Mayor has always been a supporter of the mission of the monitor. He was involved in the original drafting in 2004. We've been really appreciative of the sponsors working with us to clarify a few specific issues, and at this point, we are ready to sign the bill. As we've seen it now, there's obviously some new issues today that we might want to discuss if they move forward, but as the bill that came into committee today, we're ready to sign.
What about the direct department?
Again, we don't take individual agency positions, so we came to that as a city team, and we are all comfortable with the bill as it is. Correct.
I will add that the director of safety was involved in meetings and dialogue about this. Let's see, next up, Councilman Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the co-sponsors and all the work that you've done on this, and Councilman Flynn, for your proposal. I guess, well, if Katina could come up, I would love to just, I'm very, very interested in having not only what's outlined in the ordinance language on page 5, that, you know, that the Citizen Oversight Board will address diversity of representation and qualifications. And, you know, having the council districts represented, that gives the geographic diversity as well, and that neighborhood diversity that I think would be helpful on the COB. I guess I'm just a little concerned about this becoming a political appointment versus, and so I would love to, but versus it going through a nominating committee to have different insights. And we're not on council forever. We're here for a short period of time. And so I'm just curious, and if you have to think about this or get back to us, that's fine. But how would that possibly change your dynamics? Because if a council member rolls off, then the incoming council member would, I would assume, appoint a new person. That automatically changes the dynamics of your board. And so that's one question. But then the second question is, what is the average tenure of service on the COB? And will we, by appointing someone from a political position, affect, I guess, the work that you're doing? Because right now, folks are really deeply ingrained in, you know, reform and equity and all of those tenets. And so I would love to get your perspective.
Sure, thank you, Councilwoman. I'll start with your last question. I guess I'd say the tenure of most board members is actually pretty lengthy. And there are members who've been reappointed 3 or 4 times. And it's really a question of the mayor's office, how that went. The only time people have, you know, not served the terms when they themselves, you know, self-selected. And so I think that would be something for the nominating committee to consider, is the length of time someone has served. And I do believe the language as proposed gives the nominating committee the opportunity to decide not to recommend someone for reappointment, which I think is a good thing. I mean, I think for what I said with regard to Councilman Flynn's recommendation, I think it's an interesting one to consider. I do feel comfortable with what's currently presented, in the sense that I do think it's very fair and equitable, and it leads us to a place where we're all seen a fair appointment of the board members, and I think this is the point about ensuring geographic representation, or frankly, ensuring that all of those particular factors are considered, would be a nice step as far as a modification. I don't know that we need a person from every district. I want to also then go back to your first question, the political piece. I would say that my impression would be that whoever's appointed would stay appointed for their entire term. So if a council member from, say, changes, you know, someone else is elected or what have you, the person that's in that seat for that district would, I would presume, stay in that position. What I do think could be challenging for both the committee and any council member who want their person is that very question of, you know, when does this become a political appointment as opposed to simply an appointment to do the work, which is why I like the proposal that's currently presented, because I think we kind of avoid that altogether.
I'll ask about Cameron.
I just wanted to address that. All these appointments, even as they go through the nominating committee, they're all going to be political, and we shouldn't kid ourselves that it wouldn't be. But we are elected, each of us is elected every 4 years. Someone fills these seats. And for that term of office, they represent the sentiment and the will of that district. So, I mean, when I was thinking of this proposal, I had 3 people in my district right away that I thought would be terrific members of this body. And so, but after, as I said, after talking to Mr. Mitchell yesterday, I think a good middle ground would be
talk to him live on the camera.
Work with the sponsors to see if we can come up with some language. Just strengthen or to make more explicit that paragraph E, which I think has been ignored for 15 years, does need to be a major factor in the nominating committee's outreach and recruitment of members, so that we don't go much longer without having folks from this side. So,
Councilman Peach and Councilman Clark.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. When we put a bill before you, we only put the portions of the code that we're amending. So I just want to read to folks the portion of the bill that talks about qualifications. It is section 2-378. It's not in your bill because we weren't planning to amend it, but just so folks know, the qualifications are you cannot be an employee of the city and county of Denver. That's C. D, and this is really important, you, neither the board member nor any member of their family shall ever have been employed by Denver Police, Sheriff, or Fire. So no member of their family can come from the departments. They have to be that independent. And then E says, the members of the board should reflect the diversity of Denver, including the ethnic, racial, and geographic constitution of the population, as well as the diverse professional backgrounds, experience, and expertise of the citizens of Denver. So it is, it includes the geographic piece, so you can imagine going with a shall there, but it also talks about these professional backgrounds. You know, the idea you don't want all community organizers, you don't all want all pastors, or whatever it may be. And so I think, I appreciate the proposal to perhaps work on it. We can hear from others, but I thought it would be helpful for folks to know the language that's there now, whether we can just work on strengthening it. And I just want to clarify, though, making it a shall, you know, some geographic diversity versus every district being represented are different concepts, because you also have these other goals of professional skill diversity. So there's, you know, there is some flexibility in the current ordinance to do both of those. So that's the trade-offs I think Councilman Lopez talks about. But folks have that language in their minds as we continue the conversation.
President Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think an interesting proposal and idea. I do think there is a lot to work out before I would be ready to support something like that. The only other board that we have that is that is the Parks and Rec board, and those are at will. Those aren't serving for the term, whether a council member changes, quits, passes away from office. Those are an at will position. I also struggle with how we would get from our current board to there, because if we don't have somebody from every district right now, you would have a lot of turnover, kind of immediately, a lot of loss of historical knowledge. I also think that I appreciated reading that, because I think there are a lot of important forms of diversity that are called out in that, and that entrenches and solidifies that yes, you will have geographic diversity, but it does nothing to ensure. And you know, it'd be interesting to look at our parks board and see that yes, we have geographic diversity. Do we match the population in other ways? And would you be harder pressed to meet some of those other just as critical, if not more critical, diversity elements by doing it that way? It isn't, you know, hey, you have to live here. We have this person who fills this professional background or this racial piece that we're missing, but we have to have somebody from this district and that person doesn't live there. So I would rather see us move towards the middle ground that gets back to, and maybe even a report out from the COB on a regular basis, how does the membership limit all these different forms of diversity that are called out, so that is Brian Johnson on timeout. It was not on purpose. For future members, rather than a wholesale change to that geographic diversity. But a good conversation topic.
Thank you. Next, Councilman Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in hearing some of the discussion,
Brian Johnson, that was an accident.
Imperative that we hear from all members of council, especially the folks that are not here. But I think there's
Brian,
a
that was
couple
totally an
levers,
accident. I'm sorry.
that we could look at when asking this question. I'm asking you, Councilman Flynn. I think there's a couple of things. When you, as a long-term member of this body in the legislative branch, I tend to be very biased on the legislative side. However, I think it's one thing. In our process, we did consider all appointed by council, not necessarily by district, which also has an opportunity to meet some of those geographical diversity, professional diversity needs, right? And I think with all of us on council, especially in the past few years, we've been a little bit better at making sure we have that representation around the city in any policy that we do. Hopefully, there's a difference between that and requiring that each council district have its own appointment, right? And trying to meet all these qualifications as well. So one is a little bit more restrictive to council districts, the other one is legislative branch only, legislative branch, council appointed only, or all. So I think as you formulate this proposal, I think, you know, I think it's important to find to check the pulse of council and also the mayor's office, right? There you go. And then then we can come back to this table. So yeah, I do want to explore that. But I just wanted to put that out there, that there is a difference in terms of the style that would address some of those concerns that come up.
Thank you, Councilman Monte.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I just want to extend my appreciation for the overall conversation and participation from everyone who has weighed in on this so far. I also appreciate the changes based on the conversations that we've had at this table. And if we have criteria in the ordinance and it's not been followed, and now council will have some responsibility because council will be making some of those decisions as well. I think, you know, again, this is where looking at that criteria and making sure it's being met becomes really important. The last thing I want to say is that, you know, just going back to the question that I had raised earlier, I appreciate the responses that we got both from the city attorney's office and from Nick Mitchell around when any of the information would be released, because I think continuing to ensure that the city looks at its liability in any of these cases, whether it's police or the sheriff's department, that we should always be cognizant of that so that we're not putting the city at greater risk and liability of paying out big claims. And it's not to say we shouldn't be following the process. I think the input from the monitor during the various stages is an important piece of being there. I don't know what the history is, for example, on how many of the shootings or whatever that the monitor or staff has actually been to when those incidents occur, but I think just knowing that there's those touch points to be involved in monitoring and giving input, but the release of the reports was one of the concerns that I had while we had cases that were pending. And so I think the clarity of what has been explained sort of gives me greater comfort. I don't know what other types of reports might be published other than an annual report, so it might be helpful to understand that as well.
You want to respond?
Yeah, I'd like to respond on two levels. First of all, there is a regular report that the monitor already does that includes a summary of all the cases. The only change this ordinance makes, or this bill makes to the ordinance with regard to that is the way the ordinance read now, it kind of makes it sound like that report is available at all times. Like you could like call them up and say, I want the report. They wanted to clarify that they only publish it periodically, like once a year. I think they do semi-annual now. So there's no change. Those summary reports have been done for decades, and they'll continue to be done. The bill isn't changing that. The only clarification that was made was about special reports that might be on a more specific topic, a little deeper, right? And that was where there were questions, can he or can't he? And the answer we provided is he can. And that the Michael Marshall report, or maybe a special memo on body cameras is a great example where it's between the annual report or semi-annual report, and there's a new technology out, and it's really important to talk about how that technology is working. Then that would allow the office to do a special report. So I want to just clarify one other piece, and I think it's going to make you feel better. I think if the city attorney's office folks who do this on a daily basis were here, they would agree with you wholeheartedly that they're always very concerned about liability and pending cases. One of the things our bill has created a conversation around is the need for an even clearer process. So they already meet with the monitor and
and have a discussion about what needs to be redacted from reports. That is already happening. And so that protection of our interests is happening. It's been a little bumpy or unclear as to which law is being followed. So one of the things you know in our original bill is that it says you've got to follow Colorado law and you can't be withholding things that Colorado law doesn't allow you to withhold. So if a core request would have to be fulfilled, you can't withhold the information. So one of the things the attorneys have all agreed to do with Kirsten, who's litigated this area a whole bunch, is Kirsten, the attorney who advises the monitor, and the folks who do all the disciplinary cases from the Department of Safety are all going to get together and just clarify their process on how they do that review. So it's already happening. We could be smoother in how it happens, but I don't think anyone wants, and information that is subject to privacy because it's a deliberative process or a client privilege negotiation, those things are protected by law. And our bill is very clear that things that are protected by law from disclosure can be protected. It's just that nothing extra should be. So I hope that helps to clarify that there is no intention in this bill to put things that shouldn't be out there. It's just to say, let's all follow the same law. And then because we have such a collaborative group of attorneys, they've all agreed to sit down and really dig in and get their process better. Can't really legislate that, but they're all going to do it.
I want to clarify one final point, and that is whether or not the review of the process and trying to shore that up is going to expedite getting any of the cases processed. I know we've got, backlog and some of the sheriff cases that are pending.
I don't think so. This is simply about what gets published or what's public and what's not. Again, Nick's office, the independent office, has no responsibility for the actual discipline implementation. Discipline is implemented. So that would be a question for Troy Riggs.
No, I understand that, but I'm just talking about the ones that have the backlog. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I neglected because Councilman Flynn threw out that proposal to say that I really appreciate for the sponsors the updates that are in here on the board appointment process. That was an area that was in the last draft. And not that I'm saying I'm closed to further changes, but the changes that you made, further concerns I had before, I'm very happy with and very ready to support this bill with the changes that are in there.
Name is Dana Miller.
The feedback you mentioned. Thank you.
Councilman, you have a comment?
Just to close, what, I don't mean before, I want to make sure other colleagues have,
Further questions? Councilman Flynn?
Yeah, I had a question that I wanted to find out. Section 2-380, the removal process, the deleting the existing provision that if a member of the COB is subsequently found not to have met the eligibility requirement.
Kirsten Crawford, Legislative Council, we actually added that provision back in.
Oh, thank you.
That's in the red line, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councilman, can you closing comments?
well, I really appreciate, I mean, you, Mr. Chair, and Councilman Meach, we've been working on this for quite a while. It's been a conversation that we've been ongoing having as a city since 2004. And I think, in a modern city, we expect to have solutions that address modern day issues. I think, public oversight is one of those modern functions of a modern state. And how we do this, the civilian oversight is absolutely critical. My hat's off to our COB and the members of the COB, Tina, for your dedication and for your commitment. A board like this, the fact that we are here discussing the functions of a board, that's actually a good litmus test for how well that board is taking its job seriously, and they do. These are very serious policy decisions, and they take that seriously. They are volunteer, they are not paid, they are citizens, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that. And that is, I think, the cornerstone to civilian oversight. So when I hear folks say things like, well, we don't want civilian control or something, it already is. It's inherent. We have a constitution, we have a Bill of Rights, and in this democracy, so civilian oversight is critical to our policy. And And so I think that the COB embodies a lot of that. We do, and I do appreciate some of the comments and some of the feedback, whether they are critical of the policy or not, because at the end of the day, our table is large enough for all of that input. And we do respect it, we honor it, and want to make the best decision
I'm
possible.
going to be asking the chief of police why he wasn't at this meeting in 1 hour.
I mean, that's where it's at here. And can I add something else as well too? We look at other cities.
No, but you speak was detained, ticketed, and released.
Cities like Seattle, right? Cities across this nation, whether they are under some kind of consent decree or not. And there is no evidence that even force the claim that cities are having a problem, like Seattle are having a problem with their oversight or anything like that. Really no,
well, the guy in the camouflage pants and the Eagle shirt's a cop. He's the internal orders spokesperson.
We have won in 2004, and it's merely a clarification of those duties so that any officer of the city can perform their duties, knowing that they have the right policies in place for them to be able to do it and do it in a way that they can come home safe. So, Mr. Chair, Council Beach,
Please.
No, Mr. Chair, please.
Well, I just want to add my thanks to all the participants in this discussion at City Hall and out in the community. We hear a lot about you don't want to ever see the sausage being made. This is not one of those situations. This is a process that I'm proud of, that I think was very inclusive. As my colleagues have said, the changes that have been incorporated since we first brought this bill forward, I think have improved it. And I look forward to it hopefully moving forward.
I'll make a comment and then a question. First, just want to thank my co-sponsors. We just spent a lot of quality time together, so thank you. Our complementary skills and all the staff that work for us, so in each of our offices, and so thank you to it's been a pleasure. What's become really apparent to me in this process is that this is about trust. Right? It's about the trust of the public to use the safety department and to know that where anything possibly goes wrong or there's an accusation of wrongdoing, they can trust what happens next. That's what this ordinance is about. And then that the design of this system creates tension. It creates tension between a department, that implements the law and carries out these jobs on a daily basis, and a department responsible for monitoring that. And I want us to, credit the folks in those jobs for how hard that tension can be, and, to be in that designed, intentional tension, that we appreciate that they're getting through that, and I think that where there are difficulties, one of the things that I think is coming out of this bill is there will be more conversation going forward, whether it's this legal piece. We've talked a lot about high expectations for the departments of safety and police and sheriff. We also have very high expectations, speaking for the sponsors, of the independent monitor's office to show up promptly, to be there at interviews so that folks don't have to get interviewed multiple times. And so there are high expectations all around here, and they're tough jobs. So I just have gotten a much deeper appreciation for that. So, my question, because we all have different skill sets, and I'm always about the business. Are we going to move this bill forward and talk about a reference to the qualifications as a floor amendment, or is it the pleasure of this committee that we need to come back to committee with that language? We did have a timeline slide. Can we throw that up there? So if we were to move it forward today, we could be on this schedule. And then the bill would be done in February, and we could allow folks to be working on the implementation side. And there is some implementation. The departments are required to have some procedures in writing, for example, on what prompt means to them and what folks need to be doing. So, or we would. I did not check the calendar, but we'd be delayed, presumably 1 week if we were able to get on the next safety calendar and come back. So I don't know how full safety's committee calendar is.
but we need clarification on whether folks are ready to move it, and then we can work on this before. I know, I had to though, that's my job in this.
Yes, it is. Thank you. I've got Gilmore, Clark, Flynn, and Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank
I
you,
thought I was
Council.
headed to lunch soon.
Yeah, no.
When you mentioned sausage, you made me hungry.
And thank you, Councilwoman McKinney, for keeping us on the business of what we're trying to do here. I'm happy to move this forward. I think a floor amendment is fine. It would allow us for more conversation. If it goes to mayor council next week, we still have a bit of time. But we need to get this done and we need to move it forward. And so I'm happy to make that first motion, knowing that there'll be others that weigh in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. President Clark.
Literally took words out of my mouth. I have a second.
Okay. Councilman Flynn?
Thank you. Each actually had a very good, if I heard you correctly, a very good suggestion that in that qualifications paragraph B, where it says should, it says shall, you would give more specific direction to the nominating committee, which, I'm willing to concede, perhaps it's probably a good direction to give the nominating committee. And that, I don't know if that causes some issues down the road, but if that should become shall, I think that would address most of my concerns.
We could make that amendment here today.
Yeah. Right.
Kirsten's gonna look at it. Oh, it's here.
It makes a difference. Should or shall is a very significant difference.
Kirsten's recommendation is the smallest change we could make that we could probably agree on right here and now is that we could change 378E to shall reflect. And then we would reference the section 278E in the nominating committee's application. And we could have her make that change, so we could move it as amended with that amendment, if someone wanted to move that as amended.
And I'm not on the committee, so I can't do that.
What the heck are you doing?
I don't know. Well, yeah, it represents the city's diversity, mostly women, Latina. No African Americans specifically currently on the city council here, but those members, we don't like them anyway because Brooks is just a joke.
Council, is that appropriate? We can now.
Kirsten Crawford, Legislative Council, and you are informal here, so that is fine, but it's two changes. It'll be the shall to 2-378E, and then we'll reference 2-378 in the nomination committee selection process.
What Kirsten said, that is the motion.
I have to repeat my comment about sausage. Okay, so we have a motion to move as amended, and we have a second. From the voting members of this committee, are there any objections to moving this forward to the full council as amended?
Nay.
Hearing none, the bill is passed forward to the full council. Seeing no further, I'm sorry, excuse me.
Just one real quick question, whether you do a floor amendment or not, we'll still get a report about the qualifications of everybody that's appointed, right? So we'll have an idea of where they're from, who they represent, what their background is.
At this point, I think there will not be a floor amendment, because I think we've just amended it to the satisfaction of the folks sitting here. So it looks like no floor amendment, and we already do have the geographic diversity of the members. I don't know that we have their professional affiliations, but
The question is, will the city council members get a report on that?
we have the current makeup, and obviously it will be the job of the nominating committee to fix it as they make new appointments.
Anything further?
Yes, I think I want an apology to the vegetarians for the sausage remarks.
Well, an hour and a half indoors gets tiring, but that's the end of the committee meeting, folks. We're going to go ask Nick about Cameron's situation. See if he recalls that. That's Cameron Reavers. So we'll do that real quick. Nick's going to get surrounded and harassed. What's going on later today? Anybody got a good action to go to? The what?
Rally at 4:30.
At 4:30? Okay. At the Capitol. Wow, it's a good thing I brought my long johns and my snow pants, because it's going to be cold by then.
was like,
Not
Robin.
the site I want to see it.
Miguel, candidates. Oh, very good. Who's running your campaign?
So, me and my friend from the Brittany put it out there on social media. So I was an organizer for Brittany.
Oh, okay.
And so I have some campaign experience. And also, my friend was the field director for.
I did the signature gathering for 112.
Thank you very much,
So I'm supposed to ask you about Cameron Fowler. No, Weaver? Hold on, let me go back and double check the chat. Hi guys, we're here, still in council. That's Miss Robin, she's famous. Great job. We love her. Cameron.
Yeah, he's in the zone.
Cameron Weaver, wow, next generation.
Every now and then.
Self-defense is not a crime.
Oh man, this, what's that? Bus. Can you tell him what sound the bus makes? I want to flush that out. Okay, just to make sure. Can you tell him what sound it makes?
Wait, I think I know. If it goes.
Always time for the kids, folks. Always time for the kids.
You're thinking. Shy.
Weaver, thank you.
Is he messing with me, or what's the plan with this guy?
This is Gina Rolando.
Sure.
He's the city attorney, assigned to you. He's the manager.
Yes, so municipal operations.
Why is that?
I have a card. Yeah, Gia heads up outreach for she's great, and she also runs.
Oh, great.
Just national now.
Settlement. Yeah, so
perspective, he believes that'll interfere with litigation. I'm going to ask him as
Really? That's like
sort of beyond background for a second. I think there's some tension. Are we on the record?
Oh, do you want me to be off the record?
I don't care.
Okay, sorry, yeah, we're in a public, I guess they're off the air, but I'm still running.
There is some, the fundamental purpose.
actually envision it being
one of the key elements of transparency is basically no challenge and whether it's civil litigation or not. So we believe that our
let's see.
mayor's office, self-representation happening in these cases, whether they're being decided fairly and appropriately, regardless of whether or not civil litigation.
Tom, can you see? Let me slide out of your way.
My apologies.
Thank you, Councilman.
Please know that that's
changes that were made. Do you feel like they gave more power, less power?
I think it updates the organization, clarity of the organization. It doesn't change the fundamentals,
that's kind of
structure of what is created. I support the bill,
and I realize
worthwhile.
it's a lot. It would be a big
I'm hopeful that Thanks for that idea. The guy, hey, yeah.
So was he CIA?
He was the acting director of the CIA.
Oh my God.
I'll send it. And he was a board member of the Oversight or the IM?
That guy. When the Oversight Board was initially created,
holy cow,
he was the acting director of the CIA for a very short, it was a three-month period of time. And I guess that he retired to Denver.
He was 80 years old.
So interesting.
It's a good history.
Yeah.
Now, I
no Jason Bourne.
Yeah, no, that we know of.
Hey, the reports they were mentioning, are those available online or in person?
They're available.
Okay, because, they're asking me, one of the guys about the Cameron Weaver. It's an alleged suicide that, there's a website, CameronandJohn.net. It's kind of covering I haven't had a whole lot of time to look at all of it myself, but alleges that like this cop was calling this a shiny gun instead of like naming what it was, and that his gay lover was passed off as a roommate and not. And so I wasn't sure if you'd ever done an investigation on that, or maybe I can sit down and touch base with this guy and we'll take a look at it.
Offhand, I can't tell you, but if you could find out a little more and kind of include me in, maybe send me the link or something.
I will send you an email.
Yeah.
I think I still got your email. So. All right. Good to see you again. Yes.
Is that your body camera?
No. Yeah. Actually, no. We're getting those. I actually have a meeting with Chief Payson in about 1 hour to talk about de-weaponizing the 16th Street Mall. But I'm so reminded that the only people who are legally allowed to carry guns are the ones that, they have a badge to go with it. So I can't de-weaponize the mall unless we take the cops off of it. Okay, guys, I want you to see one more thing. You need to do the research on this one. This is inspired by Elizabeth Epps. For those of you who are still here, serving 30 days in jail?
27.
27 with work release time like that.
The whole thing.